much progress has been made in terms of research and the examination of the human brain. I think that in one of the individuals' testimony that they used the following phrase, that this is the treatment of cancer in the 21st century. I'm just paraphrasing. It wasn't all that many years ago where the word cancer was like an atomic bomb when the word was stated. But there was hopelessness that accompanied the word. And now the progress that has been made is, well, we could go on and on. We could have hearings celebrating the progress. There's a reason for that. And I think that our committee needs to reappreciate it. And that is that we made it a top priority in the country. And when we did, we said that we would invest in the necessary research in order to advance cures for the disease. Now, there's some cancers we haven't conquered yet. There are others that are really stoppable and curable. As we did that, we also recognized that if anyone that was afflicted with cancer did not have access to what the researchers had brought forward, then they were condemned to essentially the past. In other words, they might as well be living without the benefit of the research. And so today is one of the steps, in my view, along the way, because there is much to do. We know that there are colleagues, and one of our colleagues talked about this today. Patrick Kennedy has been very courageous in coming out and talking about his illness. We know that a president of the United States, at least one, maybe there were many, Abraham Lincoln, suffered from what I think was what we would call depression for different bouts in his life, and spent time, I think, with family or friends because he needed them, not only to help him, but also probably so that he wouldn't harm himself. So the history is very rich in terms of experience. We need to not only hear from the researchers today and those that have firsthand experience, but I hope what the subcommittee will do is to take the next step, and that is to see that we have robust funding for the research, because the breakthroughs will not be made, and we will really all be condemned to the discriminations and the lack of awareness of the past unless we make the proper investments. And then the step that comes with that is that there not be a discriminatory system in terms of access to what the researchers put out there for all Americans. And when we do that, we will give hope to humankind, because the United States of America is always first, always first. We have a great pride in that, and it's justifiable. But it won't happen unless the political will is really exhibited. It wasn't that many years ago when Richard Burr was on this committee that we had legislation that that established the National Institute of Bioimaging and Bioengineering. That was all. We did that because we understood that through the bioimaging and through the bioengineering that breakthroughs could indeed be made. And unless and until we made that investment, which we did, we were very proud of the work that we did. President Bush signed that bill into law. These are all steps in the right direction. The President has said, and I believe it was in 2002, that he favored ending discriminatory insurance coverage. And so we should not only be comforted by that, but match his forward thinking on this. It will take some boldness, because there seems to be an attitude around the Congress that we can take some baby steps, but we can't take the last full step that will need to be taken. And this is a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. And there are many, many Americans, too many Americans, that are still waiting in the wings to have this addressed. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our colleague, Congresswoman Myrick, and to the researchers, the leaders that are here, as well as those that are going to give testimony, which I think is very courageous from their own experience. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Mr. Shimkus is recognized for an opening statement.
I'll yield, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Shadegg is recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just make a few brief remarks. I want to commend you for holding this hearing. I want to commend my colleague, Ms. Myrick, for drawing our attention to this topic. It's a topic that affects all of us. I can remember as a young child in Phoenix area, Arizona, growing up, both seeing homeless people on the streets and at times going past the Arizona asylum, state asylum for mentally ill, and thinking about this issue. Obviously, it's an issue that concerns us as a society. We as a nation, I think, long ago, made a decision that no American should go without basic health care. And for that reason, we passed various laws that ensure that Americans can go, for example, to an emergency room and get health care. Many of us, as you know, Mr. Chairman, are working on legislation that would even improve upon that system and would provide better coverage for the 44 million or more uninsured in America who, for one reason or another, and largely for many of them it's cost, can't today get health insurance or afford health insurance. A part of that big puzzle is the mentally ill. I worry today that with the deinstitutionalization of many mentally ill, which occurred in decades gone by, that there are too many homeless who are affected by mental illness and we're not caring for them enough. I know it's an issue about which we need to be concerned, and I commend you for holding the hearing. The specific topic of this discussion today is treatment for and recovery from severe mental illness. That's very important. Obviously, a family member can affect the entire family when they have these kinds of diseases, and we need to touch upon them. In the discussion, however, I would hope that we would look at the issue of balance. One of my concerns is that mandated health care coverage runs up the cost of health insurance for everyone. And I am deeply worried about America's overall competitiveness in the world, in the business realm, because of the cost of health care insurance today. The president of Intel visited me just toward the end of last week in my office, and his major concern for their competitiveness worldwide is that the cost of health insurance is going to make America uncompetitive in the market, which means that the market for building those products will move overseas, and Americans will lose jobs to countries where the cost of health insurance isn't so great. It could well be that rather than directing additional resources to come out of the insured population, maybe these are issues where the taxpayers themselves, through the National Institute of Health or other government organizations, should be looking at funding these costs because of the incredible burden that the cost of health care can impose on America's economy in a very worldwide competitive economy where we have to compete with all of the countries around the world. I think that's an aspect of this issue we need to look at. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Capps, recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I, too, thank you for holding this hearing and salute our colleague, Sue Myrick, for pulling together an expert panel of witnesses and making this day happen in the life of our subcommittee, and I'd be one who would be in favor of this not being an occasional time to raise awareness for us. We need that, but we surely could use the community's NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness, and mental health associations that we have, those groups in our communities, to help us, along with our expert witnesses, to set some benchmarks for ourselves in terms of the achievable standards and goals that we should be, that we really have a responsibility to be meeting and make this day worth something. It is important in itself because it gives us a chance to discuss issues that are significant, that are life-saving, that will have a positive effect on our economy, that we just need to be doing as a civilized nation in this world today. I came to Congress as a spouse in the late 90s, and because of that position, I didn't come to Congress as a spouse, I came to Washington. I was able to avail myself of the last couple years of the decade of the brain. and to learn about the breakthroughs and the radical transformations in understanding the brain and the illnesses and diseases, conditions that can be affected by imaging technology. And the National Institutes of Mental Health have really pushed us and opened so many doors for our society that are now just poised to becoming standards of practice. Again, it's all about who has access to care, in my opinion. But I was privileged also to be here in the beginning of my terms in Congress when the White House had its first ever, I believe, a conference on mental illness. And Dr. Jameson, that's when I first heard you. And I was struck by many of you, all of you may have been there, I don't know, but the power of people telling their stories. And what a long way that goes, and some of the outgrowth from that conference and other effects on destigmatizing, and the multimedia campaign to raise awareness among our young people in language that they could understand and can understand. We have to keep that momentum going, because we have a dual purpose, I believe, to keep the awareness level, but also to make sure that we see mental health and diseases of the brain as parity, as a part of health every bit as much as a broken arm or a leg or a situation requiring insulin if you have diabetes. I mean, we have come a long way with cancer. We need to do the same thing in this situation. And yet today in 2006, I know because my brother, who lives with bipolar disorder, has taught me so much throughout his adult life on what this means. We still carry stigmas, and we still leave so many people without access to treatment that could make such a difference in their lives. So we have our work cut out for us. And one of the areas that is so significant to me is the determination by many of our insurance carriers that they've decided that therapy and comprehensive treatments are not worth the bottom line, and that we can only do short-term, we can only do capped treatments, we can only do quick fixes. And that means we haven't learned what we need to know about the short-sightedness of some of this. Now we need to know that we do know that mental illness needs to be treated like other illnesses. Many of you know I was a school nurse for 20 years, and a student would come to my office with a broken arm. What if I just gave that person a Band-Aid and set them back to class? I mean, it's appalling to think of that, and that's what we are doing with people who present themselves to those who are professionals. And, you know, x-rays and treatment, but denying patients coverage to psychotherapy by telling them that their mental health professional's recommended course of treatment is unnecessary, and forcing those individuals to cope alone is exactly like putting a child with a broken limb back in the classroom with a pat on the back and a Band-Aid. So we cannot afford to let this go on. We have the ability to set standards. We have shirked our responsibility, and that's why this day and this opportunity that we have with these witnesses here, we need to be listening to what you're going to be telling us, that we need now in this society, in this century, to take mental illness more seriously and to bring the issue of parity to the floor. And I yield back.
Mr. Pitts is recognized for an opening statement. Dr. Burgess is recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in the interest of time, I'll submit for the record and look forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Mr. Allen is recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this hearing to examine the progress our nation has made in identifying and treating mental illness and brain disease. Mental illness can have a devastating impact on Americans from all walks of life. 1 in 5 Americans are affected by mental illness. This hearing can help raise awareness, ease the stigma of mental illness, and let patients and their families know there is hope. Since 1996, Congress has been working to pass bipartisan legislation to ensure that Americans have access to affordable mental health care. Though it is not the focus of this hearing, I want to point out that H.R. 1402, the Paul Wellstone Mental Health Equitable Treatment Act of 2005, has 227 co-sponsors. I hope that our committee will hold a hearing on that bill later this year. Lack of access to mental health treatment as a result of insurance discrimination costs our economy more than $100 billion each year through absenteeism, turnover, and retraining expenses, lower productivity, and increased medical costs. There is no scientific or medical basis that justifies insurance coverage of mental health disorders on different terms and conditions than coverage for other illnesses or disorders. The state of Maine has been a leader in this area by requiring that insurers provide the same level of coverage for mental health care as for other illnesses. We also need to invest more funding in medical research to diagnose, treat, and find cures. Of great concern to me is the lack of mental health professionals, particularly in rural areas, and especially those who treat children with mental illnesses, a major problem in my home state of Maine. I look forward to hearing our distinguished panels share their experience and expertise. Together, we need to find ways to build a comprehensive, efficient system to identify, evaluate, diagnose, and treat mental illnesses at every stage of life and ensure that all Americans have access to mental health services. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The bells you heard, we have a motion to adjourn on the floor, which we will need to go vote on. But before that, I'm going to ask unanimous consent of the subcommittee that one of the members of our full committee be allowed to make an opening statement. He is a licensed clinical child psychologist, and that's Mr. Murphy. Without objection, Mr. Murphy, you will be recognized for 3 minutes for an opening statement, and then we will, after that, go and vote and then return.
I thank the chairman for this opportunity. We've heard over and over again mental illness is a real, not an imagined problem. As real, as devastating to a family as any other medical illness. It can lead you to lose a job. It can lead you to lose your family. It can cost business productivity. In fact, it can cost employers billions, and it does cost lives. And yet, it is more treatable than many other medical diagnoses. If we ignore it, mental illness can both increase the risk for heart disease, and if mental illness is untreated, it can double the cost of health care. Without integrating the care of the body with the care of the brain, our current system is wasting billions of dollars. But the private sector has time and time again demonstrated that direct health care cost savings can save money as well as productivity. One study reported that when depression management was included in their health plans, productivity increased over 6% and absenteeism declined 28%, with a savings of over $2,000 per employee. When workers with depression receive treatment, medical costs decline by over $800 per employee. But untreated mental illness costs about $300 billion, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. It's $150 billion from lost workdays and premature death, $70 billion in emergency care, and $80 billion from societal costs, such as the justice system. The success in treatment requires proper and timely treatment, and treatment is not just a matter of medication. For example, there was a past concern with the use of one antidepressant medication associated with increased adolescent suicide risk. And it shows you how partial treatment and misunderstanding of mental illness actually cause harm. Antidepressant medications change mood, but they don't change your mind. Psychotherapy performed by a qualified practitioner is also needed to properly treat patients. But when only 25% of antidepressant medications are prescribed by a psychiatrist, and 75% of the time by non-psychiatrists, and in many cases, people do not receive the additional psychotherapy treatment, then the prognosis remains low. So when health plans do not cover mental health treatments, including Medicare, the diseases of mental illness cannot be treated properly. Now, I urge us to also look at those businesses who have found great success in providing this care. AT&T, American Airlines, IBM, and PepsiCo are among those companies who have found that good mental health care is good for employees and good economics for the business. The time has come for us to improve mental health care by integrating and coordinating medical and mental health services for more effective diagnosis and treatment. Rather than just shifting the burden to pay for health care or just calling for more money, Congress can lead the way to save lives and money through integrated care. I look forward to work with my colleagues to transform our health care system to spend dollars wisely rather than just spend dollars. And I yield back, and I thank the chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Gilmore, I believe you indicated you would waive your opening statement. I believe all members who are here have given their opening statements, so we will stand in recess pending the completion of the vote. At that time, we will resume with our first panel. The committee will stand in recess.
All right.